want to start by naming, is there anything that Dimitry shared with us last week that was kind of like, whoa, I did not expect that, or wow, I really appreciated that he named this, or I'm just kind of curious to see what were folks' take on Dimitry and meeting him.
I think that his acknowledgement of his writing style, that he didn't use quotes, which has nothing to do with the book, but has to do more with style, of course. And when I was reading it, I noticed that, and I've noticed that in a few writers, but it was just interesting that he kind of sort of wove that into, I'll put in quotes, his writing style. Someone else I read, Nelly Rosario, I don't think used quotes in her book, which is a pretty old book now. And I don't know if he said, I don't know if he said he got that from Edwidge or not. I don't think so, but I noticed that. I noticed that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm so happy you brought that up, because especially in this last part that we were reading, I was so attuned to his voice almost, right? Like his tone, his style, which before, like, I don't know if I associated it, right? Because I think he was able to talk about, this is how I write. It's kind of like when we were discussing our Audre Lorde book last, and we were like, oh yeah, this is her tone, this is her voice, this must have been who she was. It was great to kind of have that meet up with Dimitry and align that. So thank you, Rhonda, because that's a real point. Anyone else? It's okay. We don't have to have feelings about meeting him. It already happened. I just want to make sure we talk about it and we're in that space.
I like that he always prays to his patron saint before he writes. I thought that was nice.
Yes, right. He did acknowledge sort of like that faith. Susan, if you can just, why was that nice to you? Like, if you can just explain to us.
He's coming from a really good place when he's writing, you know?
Right.
Loving and caring.
Right. That like intent, right? That I'm going to take a moment and pray before writing the story. I think, yeah, to your point, Susan, it shows a lot of intention. And I think as the reader, I
think we should all do that. We should all do exactly that before we do anything.
Yeah, ground ourselves in some intent. I agree. Liliana, I'm just going to name, you said, I like that he read in French. Me too. I mean, that wasn't even planned for real. Your girl just had a good moment with the universe. But do you speak French? Was it something that you were like, oh, I know what he's saying? Or was it just more like, this fits and I love hearing it? And you can type, obviously, if
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sweet. No, I enjoy, because I'm pretty sure that when writing this book, you know, his mother tongue is French, Haitian, Creole, I'm assuming. So, you know, I'm pretty sure that a lot of his language writing this book, some of it was in that language. So it's good to hear like his intentional language that he meant to. Right. I know he said that writing English is better for him, but, you know, speaking home French and Creole, like that was his growing up. So it's nice to like have that connection with the book.
Yep. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Everything sounds good in French. Everything.
Period.
It really does.
It really does. Like, if you ever want to try it, you know, just like pull up a French film or something on YouTube, something free real quick, or just French music. French hip hop is really good.
Listen to Edith Piaf. That's all you gotta do.
Edith Piaf's a good one. Yeah. I'm going to be a little silly for a second and say that a couple of months ago, there was a comedian on Netflix, and he was a French comedian. I had no idea who he was, and his whole special was in French, but he was super cute. And I was kind of like, let me see. And I clicked it. And why I end up watching that whole 2-hour special, I don't understand one joke. I took like AP French in high school, but it was so good. So yeah, I agree. French is mesmerizing. And Dimitry himself named for us in real time that it was also, you know, a lot of the work is poetry. So take it as a moment to acknowledge that we heard poetry in French, right? Like, I think that's a really romantic ideal. All right. If we have no other thoughts about,
I had a thought.
Oh, thank you.
It's okay. So one of the things that I found very helpful in the conversation with Dimitry was when he talked about, how is it he talked about it? Humor, like that he wanted to write like a humorous book, or he wanted to use humor in the book. And then he shared some of the different authors that he read who wrote like serious stuff, you know, but in a very humorous way. And the thing I found really helpful about that is, and it really kind of dawned on me in the conversation, that there's a lot of politics in the book. A lot of references to Haiti politics, colonialism, corruption, you know, all of it. And I think I didn't get the humor when I was reading it until he said that. Like that is where I don't think he uses the humor so much when he's describing the devastation and, you know, the people walking in a daze and the house is falling. I don't think he uses humor there. I don't think. But then I got it. I think that he uses humor when engaging the political. Like that's where he, like that whole scene of St. Peter's and all the presidents coming up before St. Peter. Right. You know, Greg referred to that last week, and it is kind of like ironic. He's very ironic when he's talking about like the president and his own ways of being and his own, you know, failings and the failings of the process. And when he talks about the imperialists, when he talks about the Americans and how they, you know, show up and how condescending and patronizing, how controlling they are, how punishing they are. There's a certain amount of humor that how he talks about all that has a humor to it. And it helped me. It helped me to read those parts in a different way and to like allow in his style of like, he's saying some stuff about colonialism. He's saying some stuff about imperialism and control, but he's doing it in a way that is probably more accessible. It's not as like ideological. Absolutely. Like to me, I'm very political and everything's ideological. And I could see how other people might not even take in what he's saying in a different style. And that this style of using humor allows more people to get the very political message that he's, you know, kind of entwining in the whole book. So totally. That was really helpful to me.
No, thank you. Totally. And it's helpful to me that you brought up that difference too, I think between that intentional humor and then maybe sort of a politicized ideology of maybe even critique, right? Which I think is maybe how a lot of us who feel political can read that part at first. And it's true, sort of like the, some of the funniest critique or, you know, some of the funniest feedback or some of the funniest, those things are often very political and sort of how we navigate landscape on a larger scale. So the fact that you named that is like, yeah, I didn't realize the humor in it until he said, hey, this is me poking fun. This is less about my feelings around it and more about like, how ridiculous is it? It's so ridiculous that I'm actually going to write a scene to have all of the presidents of Haiti pull up to the gates and prove like their corruption or prove their morality in order to enter the gates of heaven, right? So I really appreciate that. Did other people feel that way? Yeah, Paula, please.
I thought everything he said was just so interesting. You know, he could talk about the phone book and I would have been interested because he just has so many fields of knowledge. But I thought that his knowledge of politics is amazing. And he's worked for the UN and he's been on the ground in Haiti. I mean, and I thought that actually, I agree with what Anais just said, but I also thought that he managed, with the humor, he managed to be insightful, but not cynical, because you have all these aid work and he's sort of looking at them as you know, these foreigners who are there running around. Well, the Haitians are just, you know, trying to cope, but he also himself is in both shoes, and that that lack of cynicism, I think, is linked to the possibility for love and hope and recovery in the book.
Mhm.
And I really think that's like a miracle that he somehow managed to get the critique in there, but also the possibility of you know, of that, of
Of
something,
love or
something
romance.
against love. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was, you know, and that was really interesting hearing where some of that came from his really extensive political, you know, experience.
Yeah, a beautiful balance of telling the truth and romanticizing it in a way that like we can either see or be or critique and be like, that's ridiculous, right? And you know what else does that? I get all excited. Plays also do that. And I just want to name that because Liliana wrote, when reading that section, because we're referring to the section that Anais had originally named, which was like when we're having like these critical social ideologies being shared. Liliana says, I thought this would be a great play. Liliana, can you, right? So do we see these connections, Liliana? I don't know if this is resonating for you, if you want to talk a little bit more about what you saw, because I think it very much is related to what Anais and Paula are saying.
I definitely agree. I'm a very imagery person. So when I'm reading, I'm visualizing a lot. And so reading that part, and you know, I laughed when I was reading that. I like, that's so humorous, right? Like that's so, and I was like, wow, this will be a really good play because you know, you're hitting at the politics in a comical sense. Could be even a musical if you want to make it fun. So I remember having that thought when I was reading that, and it's because I read this play years ago, and it was a scene about somebody trying to get into the gate of St. Petersburg, and I thought about that, and I'm like, oh my God, this would be, you know, obviously amazing to highlight and talk about politics in that way. But yeah.
Yes.
I agree with Liliana.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Yannick,
Definitely
you got
this-
it.
I'm sorry. I could definitely see this as a play. Kind of thought that I was thinking of Lin-Manuel. I totally agree with you because just the way he mixes humor, but he never, and this romanticizes things as romance, but he never takes away from the politics in Haiti. So I can really see it being done, directed and written well. I definitely agree with Liliana.
Anyone else agree? Susan says she agrees it's a great play. Awesome.
You know, one thing that, I'm
please.
sorry.
No, you got it.
One thing, it wasn't presented as being humorous, but when you think of Secret Service here, and when Natasha leaves the city and she has one bodyguard, and that bodyguard just happened to grow up with the president, you know, it's things like that feel funny to me when you think of what security means here. And you know, security, it almost felt kind of like a Mel Brooks kind of movie.
Security, right? Versus like kind of how we normally see it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love the Mel Brooks reference. I know y'all think I don't know, but I know what's going on. Okay, my mama did right. So I want to get into the reading that we just finished, right? Because here we are. What is standing out to folks? Are things on the trajectory that you had once predicted? Do we see sort of the love now a little bit, the story of love a little bit more than the political stance? What's standing out to folks in this part? And if don't be nervous if you haven't caught up, if you're not finished, it's totally fine. Talk to us about what you've read. Natasha surprised me. Does anyone else feel surprised or betrayed by Natasha? As someone had messaged me, I'm not gonna say who, but they were like, she's betrayed me. Anyone else surprised by Natasha? Or Liliana, you could also talk about why.
I wasn't expecting her to go out of her way to go find her lover. Like, I mean, she left him in a closet. That was the last thing she did. So I wasn't expecting that she would. I mean, she is the person that always wanted to get out and leave. And so I did not. So I was surprised.
People agree with you. I like that.
She,
Any other things stand out?
Natasha must have known that there, I mean, obviously, that there was another way out of that closet. I mean, even, you know, even if there wasn't an earthquake that happened, and it's a good thing that the guy wasn't like a panicky kind of person, because he was in there for a while, like
Right.
8 hours or something like that,
Mhm.
which just seems too long. I mean, I
And
understand where
naked,
he
and
is.
naked too.
What's that, Unique?
And naked too, and there for 8 hours.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
I remember feeling sorry for him, like, oh my God, what's he gonna do? I
Yeah.
was happy when he found an escape.
That's so funny. Anyone else? Even if you're not surprised, does Natasha's actions make sense to you then? Are you saying like, if I were her, I would go back too?
But after learning about her childhood, I started thinking about her at a different level, like that she was in an orphanage. And first I was like, okay, she married the president for status, for money. But I wasn't as critical of that. I was like, wow, her life, it's understandable why she did that. She didn't surprise me, but what's surprising was the president, that he knew that Natasha and Alain were lovers. I was surprised at that.
Mm-hmm.
And how he decided, I don't want to kill him, and he was almost appreciating it that she was having this affair. He was able to see his wife's lover as a person, not just a wife's lover. I found that interesting. Very
Right.
poetic or something.
Well, to your point, that's perfect poetry. Is that also love? Right? Because he's the president. I mean, he could have responded in a different way. Is it also love to maybe not choose violence or not choose retaliation? Is that also?
Yeah. Love for humanity. I don't know if I felt that was so much love for her, but yes, it showed this good quality, and she described him as a weak person,
Mhm.
but if that showed some strength in him, that he could, have that kind of a way of thinking, that I know this is a lover, and I can look at it from the outside. I'm emotionally involved, and it's hard to judge the situation that you're in. And it was just very interesting. But that is love on some level.
Of course, yes. And I think if folks remember last week, Dimitry spoke. We spoke about how romantic love can exist outside of just partnership, right? You can have romantic love in familial relationships. There can be romantic love in friendships. Certainly, romantic love for country, which is some form of patriotism or some form of allegiance, right? And I think, Yannick, you said it perfectly, that romantic love or that tenderness, right? For fellow man, for someone who is a human, not just this other person who's interfering in this physical relationship. Am I saying that right?
Yes, and I mean, it's not like he's looking on the outside. It's not like it's a relative friend. It's his wife with Alain. So he really showed. I also saw him as not weak, as she described him. I saw, wow, he's just got this strong sense of caring for other humanity. So yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. Liliana says, again, a humorous scene of Alain naked in the closet. Anything else that's standing out for folks? I came late, so y'all making me talk a lot today? Okay, I see what's going on here. Y'all aren't slick. Come on, folks. Anything that's standing out in the plot? Oh, here we go. Is it just me? But the president must have known that Natasha was having an affair. Like he was in the palace. I was under the impression that the president knew Natasha was having an affair. Do other people feel that way?
Yeah, he on 188. This is where his wife's, says his wife's friend, he'd been born under a lucky star, the Alain. That's why the president had mixed feelings about him. A big part of him liked the kid. And then later, the next paragraph, it says he admired and envied him. And then by the end of that chapter, when he's throwing up a lot, because he actually feels pity for, somehow that gets him to the point maybe where he feels, it's at the very, this is on page 192 at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
The president felt a tinge of pity for someone other than himself. Out of the seeds of pity grew a warm wave of kindness and affection for a collective that had come to be symbolized by the face and fate of one stupid young man. And that's where he comes up with the plan to get him out of the country, but not to kill him. Right. I mean, he's a cynical politician, but he thinks complex. He thinks, complexly about him, and actually has some positive feelings about him. He doesn't like that he's sleeping with his wife, but I just thought that was kind of, impressive.
I thought that was interesting too. Oh yeah, he definitely knew she was having a affair. He talked about it. But now I'm even thinking, I don't know if I felt he was so in love with Natasha, except that maybe she was younger and attractive, but maybe love for her. He knows he can't give her certain things other than that image, the president's wife. So he's allowing Alain to do that. I thought that whole thing was very interesting and very deep.
Absolutely. And again, that tenderness, right? I keep coming back to that word. You would have thought they were paying me. That tenderness is so important, because I think we're also talking about, if we can just ground and name in a history of corrupt government and seeing what a lot of the island of Haiti has been through, right? Especially through colonization. I think it's important to name that, like, no one expects patriarchy. No one expects men. Ron, I'm looking at you to like help me. No one expects men to have that level of empathy, especially if, and pardon me and excuse my language, but especially if you're screwing my wife, or if you're out here with my spouse, and this is an ultra, think about the time we're in politically, ultra hyper masculine time, right? What's going on in the island at the time. So what do we think about that? What's up with that? What's up with that? What do we think about that?
Go ahead, Yannick.
I was just thinking, first, I just said that he could show some kind of, whatever it is, humanity for his wife's lover, actually
Right.
made him seem stronger. But then we could look at it like maybe someone who she described as weak, could say that's he just as part of his weakness. They could look at it both ways, you know?
And this is also coming out of the history of Papa and Baby Doc, who were dictators, and I don't know them, but I'm sure they probably had, multiple women on the side.
Absolutely.
And it was the norm to have a mistress, but not accept that your wife would have a mister.
Right.
Your wife would have somebody on the side, and you would accept that person.
I call
So
them
it doesn't.
mistresses as well.
What's that?
I call men
Mister?
mistresses as well. No, I call them mistresses.
Yeah, I see what you're both saying, coming out of a patriarchal society like that, where it's almost accepted for a man to have mistresses like that.
Exactly.
But
And
not-
to
but-
see him being that way, you're making a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
Are we still in that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what, I'm looking to the wise ones here. I don't know. Are we still in that? Is that how we feel?
I mean,
I'm
are
gonna
you
mess up.
asking-
I'm gonna mess up a very well-known 90s reference. So support me, because I was born in January of 90. All this time I like to talk about how I'm old. Here's the spiel. I'm actually really young and I don't know anything. But I'm gonna do this reference, and maybe y'all can help me with the details. Wasn't at some point a man who was rumored to be Hillary Clinton's Mr. I've only said it because Ron said it. It's not Mr. The person that Hillary Clinton, someone who was supposed to be someone that Hillary Clinton was cheating on Bill with, and wasn't he murdered? This was right before Lewinsky. Wasn't it rumored that he wasn't really Hillary's mistress, but it was a rumor that he was. But he actually, I think he took his own life. Actually, was what happened. Yeah, in real life. Okay, so I'm right.
You have to take Fox out of your remote control so that when you're changing
How do you know
channels,
I
you
got that
don't.
from Fox?
So when you're changing channels, you don't even see Fox. You have to remove it. That's the only way.
How do you know
You
I got
can
that from
live.
Fox?
Where
I'm
else
glad
you gonna get that from?
I know. Yeah, where
Now-
else you get that from? You wasn't alive. Yeah, I got
Now,
it.
Bill Clinton.
No,
that was the other.
that's Bill Clinton. That's another story. But this happened prior to Monica. But I think that's why I'm bringing it up, because the idea that like Hillary in this one moment would have some sort of connection, some sort of wayward, untoward connection to another man, and then not mysteriously, that man takes his own life. But then there's all these. You're right. I got it from Fox. There's all these like rumors and stuff around it, right? And then a couple of months later, if not weeks, we have Paula Jones, who we have Monica, we have all these other women. So I guess my question is, what I'm trying to say is that we have an example of this in US American history, sort of this idea of like, is it harder, is it not harder to accept the idea of the leader of our country's spouse, if they're a woman, having, you know, affairs, as opposed to even if you're a leader with title, which is more important. It's more important to have the title than to be someone's spouse. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do we navigate that here? Or tell me just what you think about it. I don't have a real question because obviously I'm so young.
I do not believe we have that as an example that you should ever repeat. Hillary Clinton had no affairs on Bill Clinton.
No, he didn't. But the narrative, what I'm talking about is the example is that the narrative that the nation took, the narrative and the way that people spin things to become, we as a nation, not me because I was a baby, but everyone else as a nation, Paula, you know, they spun that.
I'm not giving you an inch, Paula.
All right, that's fine. I'm just trying to.
I have to say, Paula, you know, being of that generation,
talk to
I
me.
don't remember that being what was said. The man you're talking about, his name was Vincent something, I can't remember, and he did commit suicide. And he was, he worked for the Clintons, and he was very close to them. And I've never heard that take that there was an affair. If anything, the scuttlebutt was that Hillary had affairs with women, not with men.
No way.
All right, let's break it. Let's break it down even more, Anais. Yeah, go for it.
Say that.
I'm from the generation. I've heard that about Hillary too, but
yes,
maybe
and that's why she didn't care about the affairs. That's why she didn't care about all his affairs with all those women. She was there with him for political reasons from the very, very beginning. She saw where he was going to go, and she wanted to get on that wagon. And she had her own ambitions, and you know, she had her own thing. It was like what they said about Eleanor Roosevelt.
Absolutely.
Eleanor Roosevelt is known for, you know, that her husband was also had a 30-year affair with his secretary. And Eleanor Roosevelt was known to, or said, not known, but said to have affairs with, you know, women.
Yeah.
Because these are all strong women.
But since we can only end up going down the rabbit hole of
this is the whole I'm trying to go
child porn. If we raise Hillary Clinton, we might get really. It's hard not to get distracted by this. I'm with Ron on this one.
Well, I'm here to go down the hole because what I think is interesting here, and I know, Ron, you don't want to give me an inch, but I think I kind of
you can.
I think I proved my point in the wrong way though. Because forgive me, I'm a baby, okay? But what I'm really naming is that this narrative of it being acceptable, right, due to political ambitions, it's okay if a man, we're just gonna say a man, and they're usually the ones with the titular power, right? The spouse usually is the spouse, a woman. In government, we see that men get to sort of exist in this narrative of like, well, for political ambition, right? You guys use some other terms like ambition and all these things, then this is acceptable. But what would it have been like if, let's say, similar to the plot of our book that we're reading, it was known that the spouse was cheating under the titular person of power, which is a man? Do we think that we'd be receiving these things differently? And y'all are already answering it, but I'm just like rewording it. Like,
it's always the way the society is, even though now I want to say we're making progress, it's always been very acceptable. I mean, definitely in Haiti, but even here for the man to do that, and the woman, it's, you know, she's like scorned for life or questioned more or whatever. That's just unfortunately the way it's been, you know. That's something that where men and women have not been treated equally. But I know a lot of times with men in power, and I do know Haiti, it's almost the norm sometimes, you know. I've you know, heard stories like the wife is accepting of the mistress, you know, some cultures and sometimes Haitian culture. So yeah, it is always different. If if a woman leaves her husband and kids and comes back, she's always scorned. If a man leaves and comes back, he's a good man. I mean, that's
right.
That's, you know.
Right. And if
I'm sorry, remember when we read When I Was Puerto Rican, that was the theme throughout the book, that the woman is the mother was kind of stuck with these, I think, 7, 8 children,
Yeah.
while the husband was out, gallivanting around and spreading his seed, but he was allowed to come back home, to his family, in quotes,
Yes, I
family.
remember reading that book. Sure, forgot about that. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's interesting that I think the heteropolitical norm allows us to then dictate what's acceptable and what's not. I just think about what would it be if it was proven, if it were true, and people can like really solidify and say like, yes, Hillary or any other spouse that happens to be a woman is having an affair with their husband that happens to be a man, and maybe it's a same-sex affair, right? Maybe it's not something where they're cheating with other men, but they're with women. I wonder how we as society then make these political affiliations and associations. And the reason why I bring it up is to name the president's humanity. Back to God Loves Haiti really quick, to name his humanity and being able to see Alain as another man, as opposed to a political threat, right? Something that's going to obstruct the already very fragile political state, right? He sees this humanity. And depending on how far you are in the book, that's kind of what Dimitry was saying. Like, that's the reason maybe why people leave Haiti and don't come back and aren't in a rush to come back. I think our political associations are really dependent on like how we accept other people, how we see other people, how we accept it. Is there a lack of tenderness in that acceptance? Is there a lack of love? Some of these major themes we're naming. So it's certainly all things to consider.
Definitely.
Any other thoughts?
I wanted to kind of also kind of bring into this conversation how the president is changing before our very eyes. Because I think there's something in there, like when he said for the first time he wasn't pitying himself, and he was like able to pity Alain, and come up with this other way of dealing with, the fact that he wanted to get rid of him. But
Right.
that statement, that is the first time he didn't pity somebody other than himself.
Right.
And up to now, and I mean, not up to now, but as the book is going along, a lot of who he, as we first see him in the book, he's somebody that's pitiful. And she sees him as pitiful, with spineless. And then even as he tells his own story about how he wound up becoming political and like the way he got, like, the young boy who wound up becoming the president, who was, when they were kids, was the bully. And then he figured out, oh, what I have to do is I have to kind of acquiesce, and I have to and he learned this way of being with people in power. And that kind of became his way of being in the world, like how to degrade himself, make himself pitiful, and do things that are, I guess, ass kissing and things like that. So this is persona that we're seeing, and then he's transforming. And so in these chapters we were reading, they have him walking through Port-au-Prince, and like when with his collar open and dusty shoes, and he's got like this real ability to connect with people, and like this is all being presented as a transformation. Like this is a person who's now like not soulless. It's like before he was like soulless, and just kind of moving through the world and figuring out how to position himself, and not doing anything really worthwhile as a president. That's the other theme, that like all the other presidents, they never really did anything for the people. But then there's this kind of change we're seeing. And I think the thing about how he reacts to, how he's moving through his own process around around Alain being Natasha's lover, and how he says things like, well, but I'm not somebody who kills. That's not who I am. Like like, how do I handle this rage I feel and this humiliation, you know, like, and he goes through that process. And that I feel like is like the author is, you know, kind of like all of these characters are changing in different ways, and how the president is changing and becoming somebody who one could respect, you know, that somebody who has dignity. So I feel like that way he reacted to Alain and how he came through that was an expression of him, you know, kind of getting some backbone and, you know,
And coming to
figuring some things
with-
out and making
Yeah.
some choices and decisions like that had integrity.
Yep.
When the president is first described, there's that scene with the soccer ball and the Monsignor, and he does like a I'll cut your throat gesture to Natasha. But the Monsignor also says something like he'll wait out there for hours to get at you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
which kind of like speaks to one doing this to a 10, I think she's 10 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the Monsignor even knowing about his temperament at such a young age kind of goes to your point, Anais, of how much that arc of change he has gone through since he was a young man or boy to where he is as president.
Absolutely. And Renee is also naming, it's like he's becoming secure in his own skin, right? And I think that's a major takeaway. The more he has to assess his own morality and care, right? It's like when you have to balance anger and something else, like you end up caring. And I think that forces you to kind of name for yourself, okay, what are my boundaries, or what am I willing to work toward, whatever that looks like. And it's interesting because for a role as president, because of all the corruption, he's never had to actually assess in that way, right? So it's a really interesting point we see him in. Any other thoughts? Maybe not about this section, but about something else you've read?
I was just thinking about what we were talking about before, like when he was sensitive to Alain and understand very humanizing the situation, being very humane about something like that. Maybe I'm thinking that the earthquake kind of neutralizes everyone, no matter what your position is. Here you are, president, and you're, you know, walking through the streets, and I mean, he's still not poor, as in poor, but it does something to you. It's like illness attacks anyone, you know. So it's making him really look at himself, you know.
Absolutely, Yannick. And let's get into that a little bit more, right? Because he's not the first president to experience some sort of like terrible thing happen while he was he was in control over the country. What is it specifically about the hurricane that sort of brings that shift or that imposition? Like, it's sad, and to your point, he's okay, he's not displaced. So what is it exactly? And if we're naming he's not a very good president, what is it that's happening exactly that's kind of making him care and be affected? And for lack of a better term, he's fucked up about it, right? Like, it's so, what do you think that is?
Maybe there's not such a difference in him, and it's still a difference in him and everyone else. Maybe, I mean, when there's disaster, it makes you, you know, if you're hungry and you have money, you know, you can eat. You're hungry, you don't have money, but still that just that moment of hunger, it's the same feeling. You know, it's the same feeling. So maybe just a natural disaster, it has affected him, even if it's made him have time to think more, like you said, assess.
Yeah, a deep empathy, that kind of empathy that
self-reflection, empathy, yeah.
Right, kind of to what Anais was naming before. Excellent, yeah. I want to take a moment. Oh, any other thoughts around this, folks? I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that next week we'll be reading part 4. And next week's date for Tuesday is the 26th. So come on time, don't be late. We'll be reading pages 197 to 256 and the physical book. Unfortunately, I have no idea what it is on the audio, but if someone does, feel free to share it with us. You know how we do. Make sure you register. Link is in the chat.
It's part 4. I think on the audio book it'll be
It just says,
It's actually not in the audio book. It's just on print or
okay,
digital, but no
Okay.
audio.
great. So it'll have those page numbers, or to what Ron is naming, it'll just say like part 4. That's what we're reading through, folks. Not that long. Anyone not enjoying this book? Because I've heard a lot of yeses and not that many no's, and I'm so a little surprised.
You
Is
guys
anyone-
are doing such a great job. I'm really proud of you all, everyone. Doing
Oh.
a great job.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Well, we always do a good job, whether we like the book or not, right? Because we're just the bomb. But is there anyone who's like, it's not hitting for me. I'm trying to see it. I'm trying to get there. I can't. Okay, well, look at y'all. I'm proud of y'all too. I want to take some time to discuss a little bit about, now that we know sort of what's next, or now that we know that he's going to move on and forgive Elaine, what are we anticipating in this last part to come? Like, where are we? Where do we think is going to happen?
I have mixed feelings. I like this. It's funny, as a teacher, I tell my kids to predict. I'm going back and forth. I'm saying, you know, am I romanticizing it too much that her and Elaine would get together, or is she gonna? That's not gonna happen. Is she gonna keep having an affair with him? Is she gonna fall in love with the president? I'm totally going back and forth. I'm enjoying that I don't know, that I can't.
Yeah.
It's not predictable for me anyway at this point.
Yeah. So let me clarify. It does feel to you that maybe she'll find her way back to the president because of the status.
Yeah, there's a lot of maybe in it for me, and I'm actually enjoying that. It's not predictable for me.
Mhm.
So.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
I know we haven't gotten there yet, but do you think she'll leave the president? But Alain?
Right. Yannick is like, no, I think she's going to stay with him. Does anyone else think?
I'm not sure what she's gonna do. I keep going back and forth.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yannick don't know. Yannick don't know.
I think the book is doing that on purpose. You know,
Yes,
I
it
think
is.
it's kind of like a part of the writing is to raise that question, keep us on the edge.
Yes,
Like she could go this way or she could go that way. And that's part of the tension, you know.
exactly. And I like that. It's good.
It
That's
is,
what
He's
or maybe the
setting us up.
president could go either way. Maybe, who knows? Maybe she'll want him in president. Never mind, you're not for me. So I'm totally not sure, and I love it.
Oh, I love that too.
Yeah, I haven't read all the pages for this week, but I got up to a point where it feels like Natasha is about to give up hope of finding Alain alive.
Well,
And
she
I don't
does
know.
in
She
in
does?
this section.
Okay.
I mean, it might change, but in this
Right.
section, she goes through the city and she can't find him, and then she goes to the palace, and actually she goes to the palace, which has completely collapsed, and she goes to the back she almost is like wanting to attempt to get back into the
Mhm.
palace, or she's going to the place where that false door was, that empty,
Oh,
that
okay.
false exit and entrance into the palace,
Mhm.
and she sees that it is completely demolished. Like there's no way
Sign
somebody
of
could
life.
go in or out.
Yep.
And then she takes that as, oh, I locked him in and he died in the palace.
Right.
And then she does lose, again, it might change, but in this
Yeah.
section, she's
She lost hope.
completely forlorn and loses hope. And she winds up also going past the cathedral, the National Cathedral. And then we learn about how, as a 10-year-old child, how the Monsignor, took her in and saw her light up around the mosaics and the stained glass.
Mhm.
And, that's how she becomes an artist. So, in after the earthquake, when she also goes past the cathedral, she sees that destroyed, and she thinks about the Monsignor, and then she goes into the church, and she stays inside the church. So it's like she
Right.
has, and this, at least at this point, she's kind of given up
Yeah.
on,
That's where I
continuing
am.
to look for him, and assumes that he is dead.
that, yeah, kind of going back to that other point though, that's where I am. And it feels like the writer is setting us up, you know, for,
Right, because he's
for
alive,
one of,
perhaps, and she finds him.
you know, when they least expect it, they will find him or find each other.
Mhm. Did anyone get real scared for a second during the Monsignor part? I was like, oh no, is she about to share a sad or like a very rough memory? I always get nervous when like, because just the way he writes too, he like does a setup so well that I'm like, I can't tell if he's setting me up for good, if he's setting me up for bad. Thank you, Liliana. Bye. Liliana had also said, I hope the author throws a plot twist. Let's see in this little final couple parts of the book. Let's see if he does something different. We're going to address a question that says from Carrie. Hey, Carrie. What if she leaves both of them alone? Let's go. Okay, sorry. I got excited. What if she leaves both of them alone as they all leave their islands, as they all leave their lives on the island, their paradise, their Haiti? Exactly. Carrie, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and talk more, but let's answer this, folks. What do we think?
She does want to, I mean, early on in the book, she does want to like go to Miami and set up like a little gallery or some kind of art space, multi-use art space. I think she's just fantasizing more than, am I on the right book? I'm sorry, I've been reading so many Haitian authors. But I think that's in this book.
Don't they want to go to Italy? Is that what
Natasha wants?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in another book, y'all.
Okay, no point. But I think you're naming, like, I think what we're naming is there is a chance that, you know, she doesn't choose either person and she just starts their own life. She starts her own life either on the island or maybe through another way, right? So like, I love that possibility.
That's a good point Carrie made. I mean, originally she wants to get out of the country. They want to go into Italy, and maybe she'll just leave both of them. Like Carrie said, yeah.
They were going to Italy right before the quake hit. I'm sorry.
No, that's what I was gonna say, because I literally, you took the words out of my mouth. You can keep going.
No, that's it. Yeah, right before the quake had hit.
So what I wanted to name was that I know it's a shift of processing because we usually would take this time before our last week to, you know, go over stuff with the author. Hopefully, maybe Dimitry will find his way back to us next week. I don't know, but I don't want to drag. I say lightly because, you know, I can stay on forever. The conversation till 8:30 if there's not necessarily any pulling points, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about a couple of things. The first is that we're still trying to figure out, like, where is the love? Where is the humor here, right? So as you're reading and as you're highlighting the parts that stick out to you, if you're like, oh, this part is funny, or like, oh, I see love right here. Remember, as a group, that's what we're excited. That's what we're looking for. So feel free to bring that, share that. Also, another reminder that you don't have to be caught up in the reading. It doesn't matter if we're talking about page 200. If you want to take us back to page 13, we're here for that, okay? So I just want to encourage folks to be as open as possible. After we meet next week, it's no more God Loves Haiti, right? The book is over. We're so happy. The next book that we will be reading as a group, which I am facilitating, right, Ron? Right, yes, is Black Skin, White Masks by Franz Fanon, okay? And that's going to be on May 3rd, chapters 1, 2, 3, pages 8 through 60. I'll have this information available if you're looking to figure out what it is, if you can't remember now. Black Skin, White Masks, I'm super excited. We are really jumping into some political ideology this term, and I'm really, really excited because I feel like the last term we were doing more memoir, so this is really, really good. Does anyone have any last final thoughts, questions, concerns, statements, songs?
I just want to say, it's nothing to do with the book specifically. I've been on this email, One Book, One Bronx, I don't remember for how long, and finally I jumped into this book, and you've just done a great job as facilitator. It's just so welcoming. Everybody's just so, it makes everyone comfortable. So I'm looking forward to the next book. And I just want to say thank you to all of you.
No, Yannick, thank you. And the message you sent me earlier, well, the message you put earlier was like so beautiful. I definitely.
Yeah, grateful facilitator. Because I've been in different, like last time, 2 weeks ago, you had an article or an interview about the author and how, and that was a good part of the discussion. His
Oh, thank you.
perspective, and that was good.
Thank
So
you.
I want to thank, and everyone, just thank everyone.
Oh yeah,
So very-
everyone's brilliant. Everyone here is brilliant. It's so great. Ron, really quickly while I have Yannick here. Yannick wasn't able to participate last week, and this is for other folks as well, whether you were able to or not. Is there any way to access the recording from last week since Dimitry was here? And I think unexpectedly folks would like to check that out.
We put them all on YouTube.
There we go.
So-
Oh, I should
Okay, great. I'm gonna look at tonight. Thank you.
yeah,
So if you go to
youtube.com.
YouTube, I guess you can search One Book, One Bronx. It should come up. So we have like almost 100 videos now on YouTube, just all filmed during the quarantine, of course. 'Cause
With our
that's-
other facilitators like Brandon. I see you in the room. Hey, Brandon, that's another facilitator. You can
Oh, I'm
find
looking
him.
forward to that. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
really
yeah,
cool.
no problem. You can go back for 2 years.
Ow.
Yeah. You
You
know,
can see when my hair was pink. You can see when my hair was long.
you know what's interesting about this book is I had originally selected it to read in the beginning of the year, but then we had to change the schedule
Right.
right after, I believe right after the country was, or the government was overthrown, or I don't know what
Oh,
happened.
sometime in January then? You mean?
Yeah,
President.
The
the president was killed.
There was a natural disaster that happened.
There was, that's right, there was.
Yeah,
right.
last year. So I had picked the book to really just try to, connect with Haitian people, and just people in general who want to, because in this book club, even though sometimes we read subjects or read books that are directly connected to a subject, oftentimes I just want to go to a point, but through the periphery of that subject. So we don't have to bludgeon a subject to understand it. And sometimes I think fiction does that really well, of kind of focusing us on a subject, but still leaving enough space and room for everyone to sort of bring their own histories and cultures and intelligences to a conversation, where a nonfiction book, which will be more, specific and subject oriented, really wants you to follow a certain path towards an answer, or towards, finding a solution. So oftentimes that's one of the reasons, even why I, sometimes will choose poetry, because poetry also does that really well, of going towards a subject without sort of keeping us on the straight and narrow path towards, some kind of end or deeper understanding. It allows us to broadly access our own cultures and histories, and while enjoying poetry or fiction, or whatever the genre that we are reading, other than nonfiction.
nonfiction.